This podcast is sponsored by ebookit.com, self-publishing solutions for the independent author and small press. Visit us today at ebookit.com.
Welcome to the Toastmasters podcast, the official podcast of Toastmasters International. Hello, everybody. This is Greg Gazin.
And I'm Ryan Levesque.
Ralph Smedley, the founder of our incredible organization, said that we learn best in moments of enjoyment. I'm wondering if it's just mere coincidence or maybe the sign of the times that our guest today will be the third in the past year and a bit whose journey, perhaps despite all odds, has taken them to a comedic stage and beyond. Ryan, who are we speaking with today?
We welcome Joze Piranian to the Toastmasters podcast today. Joze parlayed both a lifelong stutter and a fear of not only public speaking, but of any speaking into a career as a professional speaker, trainer, and coach. He also performs as a stand-up comedian. Joze has worked with leading brands including Google, Tesla, Dell, and IBM. Joze's story is featured in the October 2021 issue of the Toastmaster magazine in an article called From Silent Stutterer to Stand-Up Comedian. Joining us from Toronto, Canada, welcome Joze Piranian.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ryan and Greg, for having me. I will start by just mentioning it is true. I do have a stutter. Everyone's internet is working just fine.
Oh, stand-up comedian. Okay. Ryan, we better not try to be funny.
I know, he's going to best us.
Joze, in addition to being a stand-up comedian, you're also a speaker, a trainer, and a coach, as Ryan had said. With all the disruptions of the live events, have you been able to get on stage much recently, whether it's live or virtual?
The best year and a half or almost 2 years at this point certainly involved the cancellation of a lot of in-person events. I am grateful for technology and virtual events that have allowed me to deliver talks or stand-up comedy performances.
Joze, I'd like to dive right into the phenomenon that's at the heart of your experience and even at the heart of your message as a speaker and a comedian. And that is, of course, the phenomenon of stuttering. And I wonder if you could share with us and with our listeners, what does science or psychology or the medical profession have to say about what's actually going on in the body or the brain or whatever it is that creates this phenomenon of stuttering? Can you share some insight into that?
Absolutely. Stuttering tends to begin when someone is a child. I believe in my case, my mother had picked up on some stuttering at the age of 2. I think in some cases it shows up at the age of 3, 4, 5. Having a stutter is associated with brain differences. When I was researching this topic, I had read that there's more activity in the right hemisphere of the brain in people who stutter when they speak, and less activity in the left side, in the left hemisphere, which is typically the area that is associated with the production of speech among people who do not stutter. And in terms of some quick stats on stuttering in general, it tends to affect 1% of the world's population, although it has been shown that up to 5% of children actually experience what is referred to as developmental stuttering, and then they seem to simply grow out of it at some point. And one more fact I'll add that I've always found interesting and unusual is stuttering is more common among men than among women. I think it's a ratio of 4-1.
Now that you mention that, I can't even think of any women who I've met with a stutter. Everyone that I can think of just off the top of my head, they've all been men. That's interesting.
Anyone can go to the website of the NSA. It's not the one you are thinking about, most likely. It's the National Stuttering Association. And I believe I had read a lot of these data points on their site.
Joze, it sounds obviously that you've certainly done your research. You have a better understanding now. But also I understand that as a youth, in fact, when you were in college, you'd ask professors to exempt you from presentations and class participation after realizing that fear was controlling your life. And I'm curious, what did that look like for you, and how did this fear manifest itself?
In terms of how it was growing up with a stutter, there's actually this concept called the iceberg of stuttering. And I believe it was coined by Dr. Joseph Sheehan. And the point of this concept is to explain that 10% of stuttering is visible. Those are the blocks, the speech interruptions, and all of that. 90%, however, is under the water. And that part of the iceberg includes both behaviors and emotions that end up driving the person who stutters. And this might be shame. It might be embarrassment. It might be avoiding speaking situations out of the fear of judgment. And that was precisely what was controlling me most of my life, including when I was doing my undergrad in Montreal. I had begged my professors in my second year of university. I remember checking to see when and where the meeting hours of each of my professors were. And I went into their offices and I told them I would not be able to present or even participate in classroom discussions. So I asked them if I could do additional homework in lieu of ever having to speak.
Well, that's very brave, because I would fear going into a professor's office. Out of curiosity, were they accommodating?
The professors were definitely accommodating. I've often looked back at those moments thinking, on the one hand, those accommodations were great because obviously when someone who is dealing with a disability, whatever that is, when they request an accommodation, naturally the best thing to do is to be responsive and to create an environment for that individual to be able to thrive. So I think they did the right thing in that sense. I, on the other hand, did feel like I was allowing the fear of judgment to get in the way of the fulfillment of my potential.
Well, obviously it worked out in the end, and perhaps maybe you were not just ready at that time. Sometimes we're just not ready for things at a particular time.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Joze, the article talks about this inflection point that you reached, this point of no return when you decided, that's it, I'm going to take some radical action and overcome the obstacles in my path. And for our audience's awareness, you had structured your life, not only with this example in college, but you'd structured your life to avoid speaking as much as possible, even the career you chose as a data analyst, as a way to avoid speaking. And then you reach this point where you just flipped everything on its head and leaned in. So I've got a 3-part question for you. Sometimes I'm famous for these convoluted questions.
Yes,
but
you are, Ryan.
These are the 3 questions. How did you come to make such a courageous choice? Then how did you go about tackling it? And finally, what was your expectation of what would happen as a result of leaning in?
The first step I had taken on my journey was to learn a breathing technique to control my stutter. And that gave me some sense of control that I did not necessarily experience before. After that, in spite of having learned this effective technique, I was still holding back quite a bit. And I remember someone on the speech program had mentioned Toastmasters. I remember hearing this word, not really knowing what it was. I looked it up online and I saw that my university had a club. At the time, I had already spent a whole year avoiding both presentations in the classroom, but also social situations. I was not maximizing my time in university in that sense. And I knew that something had to change. When I went to my first ever meeting at Toastmasters, and of course, back then, those were happening exclusively in person. When they told us that the guests would be introducing themselves, I thought, what have I done? I did think about leaving, but I was not sitting next to the doors. I end up doing it, introduced myself. I also mentioned to everyone that I was working on my stutter. I was blown away by how supportive, encouraging, and empowering the community was. And then I joined after a few times of visiting as a guest, and it had become the part of the week that I was looking forward to the most.
I know in some clubs, they will ask the guest if they want to introduce themselves. In other clubs, there's someone who greets them at the door and mentions that they may be asked, and if they're not comfortable, then they can certainly opt out. But obviously, it helped put you on the spot, and it was certainly worthwhile. So, Joze, you were a Toastmaster over a period of 9 years. I'm curious, in what ways had Toastmasters helped you with your stuttering?
Toastmasters provided a weekly platform to work on my fear of public speaking while also becoming increasingly comfortable with mentioning my stuttering and connecting with the other members while being myself, because I would have been speaking and expressing myself with vulnerability in those meetings. When the meetings would end and I would be having conversations with the other people in the club, it felt like I was being myself. I had nothing to hide. I was not looking for ways to avoid speaking, considering that the elephant in the room had been addressed and I could relax after that. So I think it was a really powerful experience for me. And when I have revisited clubs, it remains a chapter of my journey that has had a tremendous impact.
Speaking of the elephant in the room, I'd like to take a little twist on that. Let's address that elephant in the room just for a moment from a slightly different perspective. Now, some people might find themselves uncomfortable speaking with someone who stutters. I think for one, they might feel bad or they simply want to help. So for example, if someone is working on saying a word, the tendency might be for them to just go ahead and say that word. What are your thoughts on that? And does it help by addressing that elephant in the room? In the article, you mentioned that you tell the audience right up front, this is going to take a while, and they might as well cancel all their plans for the next 48 hours. Or in our case, you mentioned right away that, no, your internet is fine. Please do not adjust your dial.
This is a great question, especially with International Stuttering Awareness Day on October 22nd. When having a conversation with a person who stutters, it is generally best to just let them finish their own words and sentences. In terms of eye contact, I know that the tendency sometimes is to assume that it's best to not look at someone in the eyes if they are dealing with stuttering, but that ultimately sends the message that the person is doing something wrong. It's okay to just maintain some eye contact with a gentle smile. And one last thing I'll add is everyone seems to have their own folk theories about stuttering. Oh, it's because your thoughts are faster than your speech, or it's because you were supposed to be left-handed and you became right-handed. those folk theories are inaccurate, and trust me, we've heard them all.
Is stuttering something that can be completely overcome, cured, eliminated, or is it just something that people learn to manage more effectively?
I'm inclined to go with the latter. It's something that can be managed. Some people end up managing it so well that it looks like they've overcome it. In my view, it is something that is managed, and the extent to which it is managed determines how much it affects the person's life. And I'll just add a caveat here. For some stutterers, managing it might mean only working on it psychologically, in terms of self-acceptance, in terms of expressing themselves in spite of the discomfort that can accompany speaking with a stutter. For others, they also wish to do speech therapy. They experiment with different techniques. There is no right or wrong way of doing it. Ultimately, what matters the most is whether or not the person is living a self-actualized life, and whether or not they are allowing the stutter to get in the way of both their professional and their personal ambitions. And in that sense, I believe someone can overcome a stutter without overcoming the physical stutter if they have overcome it at a mental level.
Joze, I'm really struck as I am listening to you in this conversation, and I can hear your breathing and hear you exerting the effort to control the stutter. And as I was watching videos of you presenting on stage, this point that you just made about overcoming it, not by eliminating it, by accepting yourself, I actually brought my laptop in to show my wife. I said, would you look at this guy? This is remarkable. And it was a video of you speaking on stage, and you were stuttering, you were struggling to get some words out. What was so striking was your poise and your confidence. You were exuding it. And I just found that so powerful and so inspirational. What advice do you have for other people who maybe stutter, or maybe they have, I don't know, something else about their communication or appearance that has been inhibiting from expressing themselves? What can you say to help us to break out of that and finally live fully expressed?
I often say that everyone has a stutter. I just do it when I speak. And by that, of course, I am referring to the inner stutter. In terms of what I would tell people to do, accepting that it's okay to be different was and still is one of the most important exercises in self-acceptance that I had done and that I keep on doing. Owning what makes you unique.
Well, Joze, this has been an absolutely incredible experience speaking with you today. I've learned so much about stuttering and learned a lot about myself as well, in terms of if we're looking at overcoming some adversity, some of the things that we can do. Joze, if people want to get in touch with you to hear more about your speaking, your training, and your coaching, or even learn more about stand-up comedy, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Thank you for having me again. If people would like to get in touch, they can do so on LinkedIn. It's just my full name, Joze Piranian, or by email, Joze@josepiranian.com, or my Instagram handle is at YesWayJose, and that's Joze.
Oh, that's great. And we'll certainly put these in the show notes. And folks, if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you share it with a friend. You can find the episodes on the Toastmasters.org website, Toastmasterspodcast.com, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and of course, many of your other favorite platforms.
Joze Piranian, thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been a delight.
Thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it. And I think the timing with International Stuttering Awareness Day will be quite interesting. So I look forward to that.
Excellent. That's not the other NSA who are probably listening to us right now. Which is okay. If you are, please share it.
Isn't it about time you published that book you've been thinking about? We can help with that. At ebookit.com, we've been providing authors and small presses with ebook publishing services since 2010. Visit us today at ebookit.com and let us know how we can help you.